Alright, welcome back to TauCeti Unknown Origin. Now this is just the benchmark version of the game. The actual game has been in development for, I believe, 4 or 5 years now. It should be released very soon. Now I decided to test out how the game runs, to test out this phone, and of course I'm going to be benchmarking this particular device that I am using. Now, I'll be running this game on the highest possible settings for this video, and I also plan to do other benchmarks on different options as well. So these are the graphic options that you can see. Everything is already set on Ultra by default. Now, in order to make this a valid and a good test, I will also show you the temperature, the hardware utilization, and of course some other extra things. Because I've noticed a lot of other performance reviewers don't do that. They usually give you just the frame rate, and of course some give you the device heat, but they all ignore the hardware utilization, which is a very big mistake, because you can have instances where two phones are being compared to one another. Both use different chipsets, yet one seems to be performing better than the other, while in fact it could be the game optimization being bad for one chipset while it's good for the other. In order to avoid that, I'll be showing you the hardware utilization, which I believe everyone should do who is benchmarking any device or any phone, or basically any hardware for that matters. Alright, so we have two benchmarks, Obolus Isle and the Silent City. Now I have couple little very useful applications that I will show you here. Now this application, I love to use it. It gives very accurate info on your GPU and CPU. Although for this phone, it does not give the actual usage on the GPU, so I'll have to rely on another application. Now the default monitor there works. I'll be using it almost constantly. The other application that I also would like to show you is Simple System Monitor, which is also very accurate, and it should support most phones. Now the exact percentage might be unavailable to a vast majority of phones, but on this device it works. Alright, so this is that application, Simple System Monitor. I love to use this application, have been using it for a couple years now. It's very reliable and it works incredibly well. So we have already a GPU temperature monitor. There is the GPU utilization. The RAM usage will also be active. Also a very important window. Now the disk write-read is not working on this device for some reason. It might work, so I'll just keep the window up and running. And I also noticed that the CPU temperature is not available for some reason, although you can see it on this graph here. But for some reason, if I have the GPU window up and running, the CPU temperature is not going to show up. Now this is basically only happening on this device. My other devices don't have this problem, so I guess it's just the operating system on this phone. But the rest of the graphs are working. I will have a CPU usage graph as well. It's basically the built-in version that I have. Alright, well, let me just quickly adjust the mess of windows that I made, and then we can start with the benchmark. It should be very interesting. This game is made in Unreal Engine 4, so it should be well optimized for a vast majority of devices. Although I'll say this, the optimization in this game could be better, and you are going to see what I mean what I mean by that in this test, because I'll be pointing out some specific areas where I see some weird frame drops. Alright, I think I will be setting this like that. I know, a little bit messy with the windows, but I need to do them. I need to have them in order for this test to be as accurate as possible. Okay, let's begin with the Obulus ISIL. That will be the first one that I'll be running. Now this built-in monitor works extremely well. It is very accurate. I'll be using it just to verify the other numbers. So we immediately see very good frame rate so far. The GPU usage is through the roof, as it should be. When we turn around, the frame rate does drop a little bit. You can feel the stutter there. You can also see on the graph that the game has built in small frame drops, but they are generally not being felt that much. Very high GPU usage. Temperature is around 66 degrees Celsius. That's basically the optimal working temperature for this device. The battery temperature is rising slowly. Disk input-output not working quite well. Not quite sure why. That's just how this operating system works, I guess. Well, 57.8 frames per second average, 1% 34, and 0.01% 23.127. Overall, not bad. And of course, the frame rate is around what I expect. By the way, it's running at 2560 by 1440p, so that's basically 2K resolution. The game should support that, so I believe it's running at that resolution. Okay, starting with the second test. This test should be a little bit more demanding. The GPU usage is at around 94-90%. Frame rate around 60 frames per second. Now this is one of the areas where when the camera turns around the frames drop. You could see that happen, and here is also another area where that happens. Although the GPU usage does not max out, so I believe this area here might need a little bit more optimization, but in the end it still does run quite well. Around 40 FPS is also quite good. This area also running quite well at around 54-55 frames per second. Temperature has been okay, average 50 frames per second. Overall, not bad. Now I'll do these tests a couple times just to see if there is any thermal throttling kicking in. Although this processor, the Snapdragon 870, doesn't throttle that hard. It's it's running very good most of the time, unlike the Snapdragon 888, which does throttle quite a bit. And I've seen the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 also throttling very hard. So the 870 is kind of a perfect balance. There is also minimal difference between the GPUs of all these chipsets. They're basically the same. The clocks are just getting increased as the generations go up. Right, well, doing a second test of this area. Again, we notice the same frame drop at the exact same moment. And here it happens again, exactly at the same moment, at the same time. Now, one interesting thing about this device, I can increase the GPU clock up to 950 from 670. In theory, that should increase the frame rate quite a bit, but it's kind of unnecessary because it doesn't utilize the GPU to its fullest in some aspects, so the frame rate would be the same. Of course, I can also do some other tricks with root, but that would be cheating for a benchmark. Okay, that wasn't that bad. Was also average 50 frames per second. Let's run the first benchmark again. Now, from time to time, the GPU graph on the bottom right corner knows to glitch out, and it can show 90% or above, while the actual usage is at around 70%. Not sure why that happens. Again, it only happens on this device, so it's good that I have a secondary monitor that shows the exact usage in all aspects and in all scenarios. So far, no thermal throttling kicking in. Battery 41.5 degrees. The GPU has been running at around the same temperature. The CPU temperature in this case does not matter much because the CPU doesn't have much usage on it, mainly from the fact that I record. So that's why the CPU usage is a little bit higher than usual. 57.8, that's actually a little bit better than before, I believe. Overall, I'm quite satisfied with that score. Alright, well, this phone holding out quite well. It is starting to get a little bit warm. Let's go with another round of the second benchmark. Now the first couple seconds are for some reason starting slow. Usually the first start is the slowest, and then as you retry the benchmark it gets better. I believe it has to do something with the game itself. Now the game uses 1.5 gigabytes of graphic memory. The Snapdragon 870 has 4 gigabytes of graphic memory, I believe, so it uses almost around 30-35%, which is not that bad. Good that it has so much memory, because this game might actually need that if you want to run it at the maximum settings. This is basically the crisis on mobile devices at the moment. The most demanding benchmark that you can find, and of course one of the most accurate ones as well. Alright, that was nice. Average 50 frames per second. Alright, it's around the same as before. Okay, well, I believe it will be time to play around with the game a little bit. And let's create a new character. You know, this game is going to be very fun. I really hope that it gets released very soon. Don't know about any updates from... the last update that I've seen is basically the release of this benchmark. Okay, let's set these things aside. We'll have to have more room for playing. Of course, I'm not going to turn off any monitor, they're going to be on the screen. Okay, this is how the benchmark starts. That thing trying to bite my leg off, as usual. Alright, so far stable 60 frames per second. The GPU does get used quite a bit in these last couple instances. Alright, let me just readjust the windows again. Now this is the moment where I noticed that the GPU graph on screen started to be a little bit buggy. It's not using 97%, it's around 70%. So keep that in mind. Now I just need to kill this thing. The random stutters that you can see are caused by the game. It happened practically on a lot of devices that I had. So that's normal. The final version of the game should not have these weird stutters. You can also see the only thing that's kind of accurate is the drop in usage that you can see on the GPU graph. When the stutter happens, the GPU percentage also drops, which is an indicator of game optimization. Of course, the percentage is still not correct. Let me just quickly walk towards that cliff here. Let me try to jump on it. Alright. Let's jump to that. And there we go. So, time to check out the... Can I kill that? I can't. Okay. Everything on this planet is after to kill you. Keep that in mind. So far it appears to be smooth. No issues. A little bit of frame derp here and there, but it quickly goes back up to 60. Let's see the usage. 77%, while the GPU shows 97% on the monitor on the left. So yeah, that's something that happens from time to time for some reason. Okay, my jump button got kind of stuck there for a second. Let's keep on moving. One thing that I noticed, a lot of other phones that I have tested out had problems with these things here that release these spores. Usually they torture an average smartphone GPU for some reason, but for this phone it looks like they don't represent much of a issue. So keep that in mind. Those things that can spit spores into the air can be frame rate killers. Although in this case I haven't seen any frame drop. Again, a weird stutter, and also you can see that stutter on the graph. It happens from time to time. Right, we have another cutscene. Nice. So far it runs pretty smooth. That one was close. This pistol is very strong. Okay, we have more of these plants around this area. I'm just going to shoot them to see if it affects the frame rate. You know, I believe it kinda does a little bit, but it quickly goes back to 60 frames per second. There is one more plant. My old phone had a lot of problems with me doing that. It would drop frames very hard. Okay, this also seems to be running quite well. No problems so far. Well, that's one ugly looking alien. Alright, well, let's keep on moving. Now, I picked the Vulkan version over the OpenGL version because Vulkan is overall a lot better for games. Vulkan is generally giving a lot better performance than OpenGL. The difference between the OpenGL benchmark and the Vulkan benchmark is minimal. The graphics and the game design overall is the same, although I've noticed the Vulkan version is taking up a little bit more storage. 600 megabytes more, I believe, for some reason, although I'm pretty sure there is a good justification for that. Well then, we got jumped by this thing. That's one ugly looking alien. This area does have couple frame drops here and there. For some weird reason, and I believe it has to do with the game because it happens and it occurs at exactly the same time. So I believe there is still a lot of optimization that the developers could do, although the game does run quite well. And I'm also very surprised that a game that looks this good runs in full resolution, full on 1080p or above if your device supports. If your device has a high resolution display, it should work quite well. Okay, the GPU temperature is going down now, which is very interesting. This is the area from the benchmark before, and I gotta say, this looks pretty nice. Frame rate is 53, 78% GPU usage. Okay, let's keep on moving. When you turn around and when you look over here, then you will notice some frame drops here and there. But generally it does run very smooth. Let me just go climb this. Maybe I can actually show you the frame drops a little better. But first let me kill that thing that tried to jump me. Okay, there we go. So, a nice little waterfall. And this over here runs pretty smooth at the moment. 57, 58 frames per second, almost 60. When we turn around, you could feel the frames drop a little bit. But overall, it still runs quite well. That's the first weird area where you get weird frame drops. This is the second area, where the game did freeze for a second, but it returned back to... That's the second freeze. Okay, it should be running well now. Quite stuttered there for a moment. Let me try to climb this rock. This is the second area that I was mentioning before, where you can experience weird frame drops, especially if you look at over there where the fire is. It shows 43 frames per second, 70% GPU usage. So it doesn't cap out the GPU, which means again in this particular area the game needs more optimization. But again, I'm not going to complain. This is after all a benchmark, and so far I'm very satisfied with how it runs, and I'm extremely very satisfied with how it looks. Alright, and in this area, when you look at the shrine, you also have 70% GPU usage, 41 frames per second. When you look back, it's 60 frames per second. Interesting. Okay, well, let's keep on moving. There is another big open area behind these rocks here. When we look back, everything still appears to be smooth.
Damn. Dead.
Alright, we are getting a shotgun. Now we're talking about something. Frame rate was 61. I did see it there go to 53, but it's running smooth so far, so I would say 60 frames per second. And well, this is the next big area. This area runs pretty well. Haven't had any problems with this place. I've killed this thing for maybe like 1,000 times, so let me just quickly take it out. There we go, couple more hits. You have to be careful because it knows to throw rocks at you. Okay, well, not bad. Now I can run around a little bit and see what happens. There was a weird little stutter there for a moment. You know, I wish that I could just walk and climb up, but overall the game runs at 60 frames per second, 77% GPU usage. 43.2 degrees Celsius is the battery. The GPU temperature has remained around the same throughout this test. At full on 100% load, the GPU can reach up to 80 degrees Celsius. On average load it gets up to 60, 65, up to 70. So far the temperature has remained in optimal values, which is pretty good. Well then, overall, as you can see, a Snapdragon 870 should be more than enough to play this game on maximum settings. When the game is officially released, it should reach 60 frames per second once more optimization has been done. But overall, very playable and a very fun experience, to be honest. And I really hope that more fun reviewers do the same thing that I did and show the hardware utilization, because it is very important to show how much of the phone is actually getting used before judging the phone by the frame rate that it receives in a certain game. Because, like I said before, low frame rate on a device doesn't necessarily mean that it's slow. It might be that the game is just not well made or not well optimized, which is the case for a lot of games out there. And well, that would be it for the first benchmark that I did on this phone, on this game. Really looking forward for more people to try this game out as a benchmark to see what they will get. And well, with that being said, hope that this was helpful, hope that you enjoyed, and as always, I'll see you next time.